David Donaldson, the Senior Associate Minister of Operations here at Unity of Sacramento and your instructor for urban planning at the Unity Urban Ministerial School. Welcome to the class. We have a great opportunity to do some things in this class that I think is going to be extremely beneficial to your ministry, especially if you are seeking to do ministry from a church. Now, whether you're going to do that ministry from in a rural area or a suburban area or even an urban area, I think that what we're discussing is something that must always be considered for the congregants that we serve. Are a part of a larger whole, a larger group, and there has been some planning around that group as to how that group will live, how that group will function. And oftentimes we don't consider the role that ministers play in how community is formed and played out. And a lot of that you can go right back to the way the community was planned out, the urban planning, the urban structure of things, in order to find the root of some of the challenges that many cities have. In fact, if you are on the ministerial track, one of the things that ministers do well is to challenge systems and structures. We challenge systems and structures. Jesus challenged or was challenging to the systems and the structures of his day. He was a part of a community, not just his group community, not just the church community, but the community of Bethlehem, the community of Jerusalem, the community of Israel, the Jewish community of which he was a part. And so that community was also oppressed. The Romans saw to that, and that's something to also consider when you look at some of his teachings. What was he teaching, and how did it help people cope with the urban planning that went on in his day? So what I want to do right now is I want to take you through a very simple structure of how things come about, how urban planning happens in many cities. And I say super simple because, of course, there are some nuances that any city would have that I may miss in this demonstration, in this illustration. But I want to do that by looking at my wife's hometown. She grew up in a town called Bogalusa in the state of Louisiana. And Bogalusa began by an industry. It was started all around an industry. That industry was tree harvesting. And so if you've ever been to Louisiana, it is a rich resource, trees. They're all over the place. And so tree harvesting was a very lucrative business to have and a very lucrative job to be a part of. And, you could make a living doing it. And so it started with tree harvesting. So people were needed to cut the trees, and then there were people needed to trim the trees to get the logs. And then there were people that were needed to stack the logs onto the trucks. And then there were people that were needed to drive the trucks to the tree plant. And then there were people that were needed to process the trees at the plant into products that were then distributed across the United States. Crown Manufacturing Company was the plant that was developed around the tree harvesting business there in Bogalusa. But when people came for jobs, those people needed a place to stay. And the closer that they could stay to the site, the better it was for them, because it would better guarantee that they would get an opportunity to work that day. So it started out with camps. A place that was cleared out from the tree harvesting was a place where people would stay for the job. Those places were camps. The camps turned into houses. The houses turned into neighborhoods. The neighborhoods was a group of people that needed things in order to survive on a day-to-day basis. So small businesses began to emerge around the larger business, so that people could have some level of comfort and comfortable living. And then out of that, you began to see the needs, more needs that the businesses would have, and therefore governments or governance began to take place. Now you have things like schools and hospitals and transportation and road building and plumbing and all of those wonderful things that are involved in creating community. From that point, you have to have laws and codes and policies that support the city. But I want you to see that all of this stemmed initially from an industry emerging within a particular area. Governments oftentimes do things in order to support the businesses, because the businesses bring forth the money substance that would create the economy that would sustain a community. But then you got to take care of the people that are the workers, the laborers, that are creating that are sustaining the business, basically, with their work. So you've got to take into account that their living conditions and quarters are sustainable, that they are good, not just for them, but for their families. You begin to see in this budget that is occurring around this economy, certain stratas that begin to emerge because of this. And sometimes those stratas seem to contend with one another. It could look black versus white. It could look white collar versus blue collar. It could look like industry versus consumer. It could look like business versus citizen. It could look like neighborhood versus municipality. And an example of that would be when a highway, it's decided that a highway would roll right through a neighborhood and displace people. What does a neighborhood do? What do the people in that neighborhood do? And are they compensated well enough to continue their level of living, or are they jilted in some way, shape, or form? Here's another situation of companies versus neighborhoods. I remember my brother living in Houston, and Houston had a flood. Later, it was discovered that the neighborhood that he lived in was completely flooded out. It looked like a war zone afterwards. People had to take all of their drywall out and their carpeting out. I mean, every single household in the neighborhood, some 500 to 1,000 homes in the neighborhood, all because of this flooding that took place. It was later found out that the flooding which never took place before happened to take place during this one particular rainy set. It all happened because of a business that was built near the community. And when they built that business near the community, I mean, they built structures and buildings and things of that nature. That what they did was they rerouted the waterway in such a way that it went right into the neighborhood, and it didn't get rerouted into one of the ditches or something of that nature. Long story short is the business was taken care of, but the community beside the business was not. And so this is due to urban planning. Sometimes things are done in consideration for the businesses, but not done. It's done to the adverse effect or result of for the community. We've got situations like that all over where waste products are sent into waterways by corporations, or toxic waste is dumped in poor or impoverished neighborhoods, and there's no one to have a voice for them to say, hey, look, although we are impoverished, we still are citizens, and we have a right to have clean water, a right to have a place to live that isn't on top of a dump site. Who are we as ministers to give voice to that? Remember Isaiah 61? Who's going to be the voice for those who need someone to stand up for them? And how do we empower people to stand up for themselves? That's why this is such an important, a very important class to have. And we're going to look at it from in other ways as well. We're going to look at urban planning in terms of innovation as well, because we are also seeing that some impoverished communities suddenly flourish. And we're going to investigate what is it about those communities that allows for prosperity to come about, where decisions are made that allows for education and for development and skill sets to be developed. What are people doing, and what opportunities are there for places like Detroit, that flourished? Detroit flourished for years, and then all of a sudden, in 2008, we had the bust, where all of a sudden we see the auto industry struggling and moving away from Detroit and Flint and other locations where they can continue their business, but at such a high cost to the community that they supported for so long, and the community supported them too. It was a two-way street. So we get to talk about that, and then finally, in urban planning, there's also urban protection. What does protection look like in an urban setting, and how is it planned? How is it structured? We get to also take a look at policing as well. Community policing as opposed to a militaristic policing, and how does a community speak up and share with those that have dedicated their lives to protecting and serving the community, showing them how they want to be treated and supporting them in protecting the people, not just the buildings and the properties. So all of this is what we're going to discuss this semester, and we're going to have a great time at it. I think we got a good book, The Triumph of the City by Edward Glacier, I believe is the way you pronounce the author's name. And then, of course, what I'm excited about is that we have some real-time situations that are happening all over the world that we can look at. So I'm going to be putting into the forum and into your lessons some articles to look at so that we can discuss them in the forum. I'm going to invite some people to our forum, perhaps through Zoom or through a conference call that are experts in the field. I have one person right here. His name is Tyrone Williams. He is a part of the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. He's the Director of Development and Promise Zone Development. We're going to talk a little bit about that so you can see how urban planning is being done here in the Sacramento area. We'll get to talk about Sacramento and perhaps even go as far as San Francisco and talk about the homelessness that is taking place here in this region. It's quite a thing to behold. It's amazing. So we'll also talk with Reverend Kevin Ross, the Senior Minister of Unity of Sacramento. I can't wait to get him here because we are doing some things with our structure here, the structure of this building that is behind me and around me, Unity of Sacramento, that has been in this place, this particular parcel of land for 30 years, I believe it is. But the church has been around for well over 100 years, and we just celebrated our 70th anniversary of incorporation. So how do we change to serve the people? And what do we do with this building around us so that it serves the congregants and the community that it is within? How does it connect with and be relevant to the things that are happening here in Sacramento? And how do we play a role in what's planned from an urban perspective? How do we connect with the mayor, the city council, or the DA, or those that are political figures and have clout and stature in the community? And why is it important to do so, to be a voice when a voice is needed? All of those wonderful things we get to explore, and I can't wait to do so. So I'm going to stop right there. I've already spoke for nearly 20 minutes. If I speak any longer, that would be a full lecture, wouldn't it? But you'll hear from me a little bit more as we go along. For now, I got an opportunity to look at some of the answers to the questions that I laid out in the first week. Very, very good. You're on it. Continue to get those assignments in on time on Tuesdays. The moment that they are late, if they are time stamped late, I cannot give you the highest grade. So you go at least a grade down from there. So be on your homework, stay in integrity, do the reading, and certainly give some thought to what urban planning has to do with your ministry. It will benefit you greatly. Bye for now. Peace.